What if I told you that you could walk through the chaos of life untouched, that no matter what anyone says or does, you can remain calm, whole, and grounded, never again reactive, never again disturbed? Today, we unravel the invisible chains that keep you hostage to other people's behavior. This isn't about controlling others. It's about understanding yourself so deeply that no one else can control you. Like and subscribe our channel if you get interesting information, and don't forget to do a comment. There is a moment in every human life when the noise becomes unbearable. Not the noise outside, horns honking, people shouting, phones ringing, but the noise within, the mental spinning, the emotional flares. The invisible waves of tension that rise when someone rolls their eyes at you, when a stranger interrupts you, when a loved one disappoints you, when the world doesn't act the way you believe it should. And you clench your jaw, you frown, your shoulders stiffen, and somewhere inside, a fire begins to rise. That fire we call anger. It rushes through your chest and tightens your breath, but beneath it, quietly, sits something much older. Something you've carried for years, something you've never dared to meet in silence. Anger, for most people, appears to be a response, a reaction to an external event. Someone said something offensive. Someone betrayed your trust. Someone crossed a boundary you thought was obvious. The common belief is, they made me feel this way, but nothing could be further from the truth. No one outside you can create the storm within you. They can only disturb what is already unsettled. That is the bitter pill most never want to swallow, because it shifts the responsibility of peace from others to you. What if the person who offended you wasn't truly the cause of your anger? What if they were simply the match that ignited the dry forest of your unhealed wounds? This question can change your entire life if you're brave enough to answer it honestly, because hidden behind every flare of irritation lies a part of yourself you've tried to ignore, deny, or bury. The truth is, most anger isn't rooted in injustice. It's rooted in insecurity. You feel insulted because deep down you still crave to be seen as worthy. You feel disrespected because part of you is still unsure if you're enough. You feel enraged because someone exposed a crack in your identity that you've been desperately trying to cover with performance, approval, or power. You were not born angry. You were born whole, present, and at peace. Anger was learned. It was inherited. It was modeled and mimicked until it became familiar. A defense mechanism, a mask, a sword you picked up whenever the world didn't mirror back the image you wanted to believe about yourself. You learned early on that showing pain made you vulnerable, but expressing anger made you seem strong. So you hid your wounds under fury. You silenced your hurt with rage. And over time, you forgot the original wound even existed. All you knew was the reaction, the trigger, the emotion, but not its source. To free yourself from being easily angered, you must be willing to walk into your own shadows. You must ask yourself, not why did they do this to me, but why did this hurt me so deeply? The answer is never on the surface. You must sit with the discomfort, not to judge it, but to understand it. Perhaps the reason you snapped at your partner wasn't because they were late, but because their lateness made you feel unimportant. And that feeling of being unimportant, that's not new. That feeling may have first taken root when you were a child, waiting for a parent who never came, a teacher who never listened, a friend who never called. It became a pattern, a belief, a scar, and every time someone touched it, the old emotion returned, not because of them, but because it was never fully healed. To never be bothered by anyone is not a matter of avoiding people. It's not about cutting the world out and building walls so high that no one can reach you. That's not strength. That's fear disguised as self-preservation. True inner peace doesn't come from isolation. It comes from integration. From knowing every corner of yourself so well that nothing catches you off guard. When you have walked through your own emotional ruins, no one else's chaos can shake you. You recognize it for what it is, a reflection, a mirror, an invitation to return inward. When a person no longer reacts with anger, they are not passive, they are not detached or dull. In fact, they are more present than ever, but their presence is grounded. They are no longer at the mercy of unconscious patterns. Their nervous system is no longer hijacked by every disagreement or disappointment. They have, through deep inner work, identified every hook, every button, every trigger, and slowly, gently, they have removed them all. Not by force, not by suppression, but by understanding. Think about the last time you were truly angry. Trace it back. What were you trying to protect? Your pride, your image, your need to be right, your need to be loved? Beneath the anger, what did you really want? And what part of you believed you couldn't get it without a fight? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary, because every time you get angry, you are defending something fragile, something unhealed. The person who lives from their wholeness has nothing to defend, and so nothing disturbs them. There is immense power in knowing yourself so completely that no insult lands, because you no longer rely on external validation. There is freedom in walking away from arguments, not because you fear conflict, but because you recognize what is and isn't yours to carry. When you meet someone who tries to provoke you, and you feel nothing but compassion for their suffering, you know you've transcended the game. Because that's what most human interactions become, games of projection, blame, and emotional ping-pong, but you don't have to play. You can stand in silence and simply observe, not with superiority, but with understanding. This is not about being emotionless. Emotions are part of the human experience. Anger will still arise, but it will no longer consume you. It will no longer dictate your words, your decisions, your peace. You will feel it, recognize it, learn from it, and then let it go, like a wave that washes over and recedes, leaving no trace. That is emotional maturity. That is inner freedom. The real challenge isn't in controlling others. It's in understanding why you ever believed they had control over your emotions in the first place. Somewhere along the line, you gave pieces of yourself away. You allowed your worth to depend on others' opinions. You made your peace conditional upon others' behavior. And now, every time they fail to meet your expectations, you erupt. Not because they failed, but because you outsourced your identity to them. Reclaiming that identity means taking full responsibility for your inner state. No longer blaming, no longer waiting, no longer needing. When you begin this journey, it feels like grief, because you must mourn the illusions you once clung to, the belief that others should behave a certain way, that life should be fair, that you deserve a world that protects your ego. All of that must be released, and in its place, a deeper truth emerges. The world is not here to validate you. It is here to reflect you. Every encounter is a teacher. Every irritation is a signpost, and every person who triggers you is offering a mirror to a part of yourself that still longs to be seen. The irony is, once you stop needing others to change, you begin to change. You stop reacting. You start responding. You stop taking things personally. You begin to see more clearly. Your conversations become cleaner. Your energy becomes lighter, and your presence becomes magnetic. People feel it. They don't know what it is, but they sense it. A calm that cannot be shaken. A power that doesn't dominate, but radiates. This transformation is not fast. It is not easy. It requires a commitment to radical self-honesty, to sitting with discomfort without running from it, to holding space for your wounds without letting them control you. But every moment spent in that silence brings you closer to the life you were meant to live, not one ruled by reactivity, but one led by awareness. No one can walk this path for you, but every step you take inward will reflect outward in unimaginable ways. Relationships will shift, boundaries will strengthen, chaos will dissolve, not because you forced others to behave, but because you no longer depend on them to feel whole. And in that space, anger has no home, offense has no root, irritation has no oxygen, only stillness remains, and in that stillness, you become untouchable. There is a silent prison where most people live, and they don't even realize it. It's built from expectations, held together by unseen chains of emotional dependency. They walk through life outwardly free, yet inwardly shackled to what others think, what others say, how others act. Their peace is always just one moment away from collapse, hanging by a thread tied to someone else's behavior. And they wonder why they can't find calm, why they feel reactive, why they're so easily disturbed. The truth is difficult to hear, but liberating when faced. You are not angry because people hurt you. You are angry because you believed they had the power to define you. As long as your identity is built on the fragile scaffolding of external validation, you will be vulnerable to the winds of life. Every disapproving glance, every harsh word, every unmet expectation will feel like a personal attack. Not because it is, but because it exposes something within you that was never truly settled. The illusion is that if people just behaved better, if the world just got in line, you would finally feel whole. But that fantasy is the very root of your suffering. You may not realize it, but the need to be liked, respected, understood, these needs have become chains, not because they are wrong to have, but because they have become requirements for your inner stability. You've handed your sense of peace to the reactions of others, and now you live in constant tension, monitoring, adjusting, pleasing, performing, just to keep the external world in harmony, so your internal world doesn't collapse. But there is no end to that dance. You will always be one comment away from spiraling, one disagreement away from rage, one perceived slight away from emotional war. So long as your emotional state is tied to the approval or disapproval of others, you will never be free. You will always be controlled, not by people, but by your unconscious need for control. That is the trap, thinking that by managing others' opinions you can protect yourself. But real power begins the moment you realize you don't need anyone to see you a certain way in order to be at peace. You don't need to prove anything, defend anything, or be anything more than what you already are. Freedom does not come from being liked. It comes from letting go of the need to be liked. Peace does not come from being agreed with. It comes from knowing that disagreement doesn't shake your truth. Love does not require validation. It requires presence. The moment you let go of needing others to act a certain way so you can feel good, you take your power back, not over them, but over yourself. This isn't about becoming indifferent or cold. It's about becoming deeply rooted. It's about standing so firmly in your own awareness that you no longer rely on others to regulate your emotions. You no longer need to convince anyone of your worth because you have finally stopped questioning it yourself. And when someone disrespects you, you no longer collapse, you no longer fight. You simply see it for what it is, a reflection of their own inner chaos, not a commentary on your value. You don't react, not because you're suppressing, but because you understand. The more you understand yourself, the less others can control you. You begin to notice the pattern. The way your emotions used to rise like waves every time someone pulled on the strings of your insecurities. And now those strings are gone, the puppet has cut its cords, there is no more performance, only presence. Imagine standing in front of someone who insults you, and instead of flaring with anger, you feel a quiet detachment. Not a dismissive coldness, but a warm clarity. You see their pain. You feel the smallness behind their need to attack. You recognize that their behavior is not about you. It never was. And so, you do not take it in. You do not let it stain your spirit. You let it pass through like wind through open space. That is the kind of power that cannot be taken. It can only be cultivated through years of shedding, remembering, and returning to yourself. It may take time, years even, because the layers of false identity run deep. You were conditioned to believe that your value came from outside, that if others approved of you, you mattered, that if they rejected you, you failed. These beliefs were not chosen, they were inherited, but now you have a choice. You can question them, you can trace their origins, you can sit with the pain they created and offer it something it never received, your full attention. And in doing so, the spell begins to break. The people who bother you most often reveal the places where you are still bound. If someone's arrogance enraged you, look inward. Does it awaken the part of you that fears being seen as small? If someone's criticism breaks you, ask yourself, are you still tying your worth to how others see you? Every trigger is a teacher, every conflict a mirror. The outer world reveals the inner landscape. Not so you can blame others, but so you can reclaim yourself. And what happens when you reclaim yourself is extraordinary. You begin to walk through life with a steady calm, not because nothing happens, but because your sense of self no longer wavers with every external shift. You stop trying to manage others. You stop trying to be understood by everyone. You stop needing to prove anything. You just show up, real, honest, grounded. And in that space, very few things can bother you. Because you've stopped giving them access to the parts of you that once screamed for validation. The people who used to trigger you now seem transparent. You see their patterns. You understand their wounds. You recognize the roles they play, not to hurt you, but to survive their own inner storms. You no longer take it personally, because you no longer take it inside. You are not cold, you are compassionate. But you are no longer available for emotional manipulation. This transformation will confuse people. They will poke, test, prod, trying to get a reaction from you because your old self, the reactive self, was predictable. You dance the familiar dance of projection. Now, you've stepped off the stage, and when they try to pull you back into the script, they'll find there is no longer an actor waiting, only presence, only awareness. Only you and you'll begin to notice something else, a new kind of peace, not the kind that comes from avoidance, but the kind that comes from alignment. You start speaking more clearly, listening more deeply, loving more freely. You stop arguing just to be right. You stop defending just to be seen. You start choosing peace not because you're passive, but because peace is your natural state, and you refuse to let anyone pull you out of it. You don't chase apologies. You don't demand recognition. You don't need to win. You simply live in a way that is no longer dictated by others' perceptions. That is the real win, and it cannot be taken by anyone. Because it is not built on them, it is built on you. The irony is, when you stop needing others to be a certain way, they often change anyway. Your detachment creates space for authenticity. Your calm invites them into their own reflection. But even if they don't change, it doesn't matter, because you are no longer living to fix, to manage, to control. You are living to be free, and freedom is not loud. It is not boastful. It is subtle, powerful, unwavering. It doesn't shout, it radiates, it doesn't convince, it simply is. When you find it, nothing can bother you, because you no longer hand out the key to your peace. And if one day someone says something cruel, and you feel a flicker of emotion rise, you'll pause, not to react, but to listen. To ask yourself what part of you still needs love, still needs healing, still needs attention, and you'll give it that love, that attention, that healing, not from the world, but from within. That is the journey. Not of escape, but of return, and when you arrive you'll find the anger is gone, the hurt has softened, the reactions have stilled, only you remain. There is something incredibly powerful that happens when you stop reacting and begin observing. The shift isn't loud, it doesn't announce itself. It happens in silence, often unnoticed by the world. But inside, everything begins to change. It is the quiet moment when you realize that you don't have to match the energy of what's around you. That you don't have to meet chaos with chaos, fire with fire, insult with insult. That you can feel the surge of emotion rise, and still not act on it. That awareness is the beginning of mastery. The world will never stop presenting you with challenges. People will interrupt you, disrespect you, test you. Situations will unfold in ways that feel unfair, painful, or confusing. But that is not what causes suffering. Suffering comes from your resistance, from your unwillingness to sit with what is, without needing to fix, control, or retaliate. We've been taught to fight fire with fire, to raise our voice when we feel dismissed, to dominate when we feel weak. But in doing so, we become the very thing that wounded us. There is another way, a more powerful way, a way that requires nothing from the outside world, a way that doesn't depend on others changing, apologizing, or understanding. This path asks you to stay conscious in the very moment your old self would explode. It's in that split second, that fragile in-between space, where the work begins. When you feel the rush of anger, the heat in your chest, the shaking in your hands, don't run from it. Don't act from it. Let it rise, watch it. Stay with it like you would sit beside a stormy child, not to shut it down, not to silence it, but to witness it fully without being consumed by it. That is what it means to transmute emotion. To transform the raw energy of reactivity into clarity, presence, and choice. Every emotion is energy, and that energy can either be leaked or directed. When you lash out in anger, you leak. When you blame, criticize, or defend, you leak. But when you pause, breathe, and turn inward, you hold that energy, you contain it, and in containment it transforms. That fire becomes light, that pressure becomes insight, that rage becomes vision. This process doesn't suppress emotion, it refines it. It takes the wild, untamed heat of reaction and turns it into power. You're not pretending not to feel. You're feeling so deeply that you no longer need to express it in destructive ways. You become a container vast enough to hold the storm without being torn apart by it. And in that strength there is peace. A peace not dependent on quiet surroundings, but a peace born from emotional maturity. It's not easy. There will be moments when the wave of emotion crashes harder than expected, when the old habit pulls you into reaction before you can stop it. And that's okay. This is not about perfection. It's about presence. Every moment is a new opportunity to choose differently, to pause, to step back from the edge, to breathe deeper, to feel more consciously. And with each choice, the emotional charge begins to dissolve. You'll notice the difference. A conversation that would have once triggered an outburst now only brings a soft ache. An insult that would have sent you spiraling now barely stings. A disrespect that would have led to confrontation now becomes a mirror showing you how much stronger you've become. Because the real transformation is not when others change. It's when they no longer have the power to disrupt your inner state. This inner state, this calm, grounded presence isn't born from detachment or indifference. It's born from integration, from having faced your pain, your triggers, your old stories, and choosing to no longer act from them. When you truly understand the source of your reactions, you stop blaming others for awakening them. You thank them silently for showing you where you still have work to do, and then you do the work alone, in silence, not to fix yourself, but to remember who you were before the world told you how to feel. You were not born reactive. You were born with a wide, open awareness. Over time, experiences shaped your nervous system, taught you to flinch, to defend, to attack. But now you get to return, not to who you were as a child, but to the powerful awareness that always lived underneath. That part of you has never been angry, never been triggered. It just watched, it waited, and now it leads. When you start living from that awareness, others will notice, not because you're louder, but because you're quieter. Not because you dominate the room, but because your energy is untouchable. You stop explaining yourself, you stop arguing, you stop needing to be right, you listen more, you speak only when necessary. Your words carry weight because they are no longer reactions. They are expressions of presence, and those who once tried to provoke you, they will feel confused. Their tactics won't work anymore. Their projections will fall flat. The hooks they used to pull you in now dissolve in the stillness of your gaze. You see them, but you no longer bite. You no longer respond from pain, because the pain is no longer running the show. You are. To walk this path, you must become intimate with your emotional body. You must know how anger feels, not just in your mind, but in your breath, your chest, your stomach. You must learn to recognize the early signs, the tightening, the shallowness, the quickening. These are not enemies, they are signals, messengers, invitations to return to center, and when the heat rises, let it, but do not let it lead, let it speak, but do not follow, let it show you what's unresolved, but do not let it dictate your response. You are the container, the temple, the mountain. The fire can burn inside you without ever escaping your lips. And in that burn, clarity emerges. Sometimes that clarity will lead you to speak with firm truth. Sometimes it will lead you to walk away. Sometimes it will lead you to sit in silence, watching the other unravel, knowing you have no role to play in their chaos. Every response becomes conscious, deliberate, empowered. You no longer play the game of who can yell louder, who can outsmart, who can win the fight. You've already won because nothing owns you anymore, not even your emotions. That is the secret, not in denying emotion, but in owning it so fully that it cannot own you. People may say you've changed, that you're different, colder, too quiet. Let them. They're not used to presence. They're used to reaction, to drama, to the dance of emotional projection. You've stepped out of the theater. You're no longer available for performances. Only truth, and truth, when embodied, is the most grounded force on this planet. It doesn't argue, it doesn't chase, it simply is. And from that place, you begin to live differently. You start seeing people clearly, not through the lens of your own wounds, but through the clarity of compassion. You see their fear, their insecurity, their unmet needs. And you no longer confuse their behavior with your identity. You no longer need to change them. You no longer need them to see you. You've seen yourself, and that is enough. There is a power unlike any other, and it does not come from money, control, influence, or force. It is the power of emotional sovereignty, the quiet, unmoving authority over your own inner world. You will know you have touched it the day you walk through conflict and remain whole. The day someone screams, insults, lies, and tries to provoke you, and you feel a rising wave within, but it does not take you under. You feel it, watch it, and breathe it into stillness. It's not suppression. It's transformation. That's what sovereignty feels like. You are not held together by effort anymore. You are grounded in something deeper. Most people don't realize how deeply entangled they are with the world around them. Their moods shift like wind depending on how they are treated. They smile only when they're praised. They frown when ignored. They erupt when disrespected. And they wonder why life feels like an emotional storm. It is because their peace is conditional. It's rented space in the hands of others, always vulnerable to eviction. But there is another way, a more permanent place of residence, one built not on approval, but on awareness. To reach that place, you must begin to recognize where you've given your power away, and that recognition is not comfortable, it's raw, because you'll start to see the truth behind your people, pleasing, your defensiveness, your passive aggression, your silence, your rage. You'll begin to see that almost every emotional reaction was not truly about the moment itself, but about your relationship with yourself being mirrored by another, your self-worth dangled by the hands of someone else's opinion. Your image propped up by fragile expectations. But the day you stop requiring the world to be soft so you can be calm is the day you begin building real strength, not hardened strength, not armoring, but deep-rooted presence that no one can shake. You no longer need apologies to feel peace. You no longer crave attention to feel whole. You no longer collapse when abandoned, because you have returned to yourself. And the self you have returned to does not beg, it does not chase, it does not flinch. It observes, it feels, and it decides, consciously, wisely, and without emotional debt. True emotional sovereignty means that you are no longer ruled by anything you haven't chosen. You are not tossed around by moods, not triggered into patterns, not hijacked by old stories. You notice the rise of reaction, and instead of jumping in, you pause. You give space between the stimulus and the response. And in that space, something magical happens. You remember who you are, not the version of you that's trying to prove something, but the one who is already complete. When you reach this level of presence, your inner compass becomes more powerful than any external force. People will still misunderstand you. They will still project onto you. They may still try to control you with guilt, shame, manipulation, or charm, but their power no longer penetrates. Not because you've built walls, but because you've cultivated boundaries so alive, so clear, that nothing false can cross them. Your no becomes sacred. Your silence becomes a statement. Your absence becomes medicine. In this state, everything becomes cleaner. Relationships, decisions, conversations. You no longer tolerate what once drained you. You no longer perform for connection. You no longer hold on to what costs you peace. The old you would have stayed to explain, to convince, to fix, to smooth things over. The new you simply leave what doesn't honor your peace, not from bitterness, but from clarity. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care enough about yourself to stop leaking energy into places that don't grow you. This kind of clarity cannot be faked. It is cultivated in the quiet moments, when no one is watching, when you are sitting alone with the discomfort of not being liked, not being validated, not being understood. You sit with it, breathe into it, and you stop resisting it. You realize you don't need the world to validate your worth anymore, because it was never theirs to validate. It was always yours to remember. The beauty of this transformation is that it doesn't make you distant. It makes you deeply present. You begin to love more authentically. You begin to listen without needing to defend. You begin to express without fear of rejection. Because you're no longer creating emotional contracts with the world. I'll be kind if you're kind. I'll be calm if you're respectful. I'll feel good if you see me a certain way. No, that contract is torn. You are whole already, and from that wholeness, love becomes unconditional, truth becomes effortless, and peace becomes your default. People around you may not understand at first. Your peace may make them uncomfortable. Your silence may be misread. Your detachment may be mistaken for coldness, but in time, they'll feel the difference, because what you now offer is real, not reactive love, but conscious presence, not forced kindness, but authentic alignment. And if they can't meet you there, you no longer shrink to fit. You bless them and move forward. What's most surprising is how much lighter life becomes. You spend less time overthinking, less time justifying, less time repairing the damage caused by emotional reactions. Instead, your energy flows into creation, connection, and calm. You walk into rooms with quiet authority. You no longer fear confrontation because you no longer fight to win. You listen to understand and speak only when your voice is aligned with your values. There will still be moments where the old triggers rise. A memory resurfaces, a wound opens, and in those moments you'll be tested, not by others but by yourself. Will you react as you used to, or will you rise as who you've become? And even if you slip, you'll catch yourself faster. You'll return to center more quickly, because the work has become muscle memory, and peace is no longer a goal. It is your baseline. Sovereignty doesn't mean you don't feel. You feel deeply, but your feelings no longer drive your behavior. They guide, they inform, but you choose. That's the difference. You are no longer on autopilot. You are awake, fully, constantly, and that awareness begins to shape every moment of your life. You start choosing environments that nourish you. Relationships that respect you, thoughts that uplift you, words that reflect you, actions that align with your core, and when you see something that no longer fits, you don't force it. You simply bless it and release it. That is the essence of power, not in what you can hold onto, but in what you can let go of with grace. When you've reached this state, being angry or bothered starts to feel foreign, not because you've become passive, but because your soul no longer vibrates at the frequency of conflict. You don't live in reaction anymore, you live in revelation. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to deepen your peace. Every interaction becomes a reflection of how much you've grown. And every trigger becomes a teacher. You no longer waste your fire on proving your point. You let your presence speak for itself. You no longer chase understanding. You rest in knowing. You no longer seek revenge. You trust the flow because what you have built within yourself is no longer fragile. It's not a performance. It's not a mask. It is real. And because it is real, it is indestructible. And this is the final freedom. When your internal state is no longer dependent on the external world, when your joy, your calm, your clarity, your truth are not reactive states, but permanent residents in the home of your being, nothing outside of you owns you anymore. And when nothing owns you, nothing can disturb you. This isn't just a new way of living, it is a new way of being, untouchable, unshakable, and so you arrive not at a destination but at a state of being, one you carved from the inside out. You didn't escape your anger, you didn't pretend it wasn't there. You met it face to face, and in doing so, you saw its true shape. You realized it wasn't your enemy, it was your invitation. It pointed to the very places within you that needed your presence. And instead of reacting, instead of running, you stayed. What once ignited you no longer stirs your peace. What once provoked you now reveals how far you've come. The insults, the dismissals, the drama. They pass like clouds over a still lake. Not because they no longer exist, but because you are no longer available to be shaken by them. You do not need to fight to prove who you are it. You do not need to correct those who misunderstand you. You've stopped living to be understood. You live to be aligned. This isn't the kind of power people see right away. It's subtle, quiet, but unmistakable. You can walk into chaos and remain calm. You can stand in the presence of provocation and stay soft. You can be rejected, ignored, attacked, and still return home to yourself, because your home is no longer outside you, it is within. And when you live from that place, the world changes. Not because it becomes softer, but because you become stronger. Not harder, stronger, rooted, conscious, awake. No one can make you feel small again, because you no longer forget your own vastness. No one can drag you into conflict, because you no longer play in the field of emotional tug-of-war. You choose where your energy goes. You choose when to speak and when to stay silent. You choose peace, not as an escape, but as your natural state. This is the life you've been moving toward, not free from challenge, but free from being ruled by it. Not free from emotion, but free from enslavement to it. Not free from others, but free from needing them to be anything different for you to feel whole. You've remembered something ancient, something sacred. That you were never broken, that you never needed to fight your way to peace, you only needed to return, and now that you have nothing, and no one can take it from you,